You're listening to Tales from the Field, a podcast about the field-going adventures of Fish and Wildlife Service employees in the Pacific Northwest and Islands, told by the people who live them. I'm Sarah Levy from External Affairs in Portland, Oregon. In today's podcast, we're going to talk about connections, special connections. I'm talking about the kinship that comes from unexpected places and results in remarkable conservation gains. Nick George, the state coordinator for the Partners for Fish and Wildlife program in Washington, is sharing his story. This podcast was recorded with the help of External Affairs Officer Dana Bivens. Dana grew up in California, is an accomplished equestrian, and is still adjusting to Portland's waterlogged weather. Dana works on behalf of the Ecological Services program in the Portland Regional Office.
My name is Nick George. I'm the state coordinator for the Partners for Fish and Wildlife program in Washington State. Essentially, what that fancy title means is that I work with private landowners and other conservation organizations to provide technical and financial assistance to those interested in voluntarily restoring wildlife habitat for federal trust species. My story from the field takes place in humid southern Illinois, where I was a field biologist for the Partners program. From the north, you have the western Great Plains pushing down on it. From the east, you have the eastern deciduous forests. From the west, you have the Ozark uplift. And from the south, you even have the Gulf Coastal Plain pushing up into the southern tip of the state, which makes it incredibly interesting for any naturalist. This particular morning did not disappoint as I started up the truck and had to put the defrost on full blast in the middle of August just to clear the condensation from the windshield. As I'm driving down the road, had to stop on the gravel to let a timber rattlesnake cross. And as I'm pulling up to my site visit, listen to the wonderful calls of summer tanagers. Before this visit, I'd been participating in a local partnership that was focused on strategic landscape scale forest and prairie restoration. These restorations that we were trying to accomplish took place within a complex of U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service property, Forest Service property, Illinois DNR, Natural Heritage, and other NGO-owned properties. And after some months of collaboration, this was our first so-called sales pitch to any private landowner. This landowner, who went by the nickname of the Mayor, was not just any landowner. He's what we like to call a focal landowner. He's someone who owned property that was strategically located in one of our focus areas, and someone that others in the community looked up to and trusted.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt here to tell you a little more about the mayor. Imagine a tall, older gentleman. He's got gray hair, wears blue jeans, flannel shirts, and a ball cap that bears the name of the quarry he owns. The mayor is a man that speaks with confidence and has a fair amount to say. He's a voice of considerable experience and clout. To tell you the truth, Nick's got a tall hill to climb to win over the mayor. Listen on.
The mayor was not just any landowner for another reason, too. He was a pretty tough cookie who did not trust the government. And when I say tough cookie, I mean overbaked and left out on the counter uncovered for about a week tough. The mayor also didn't come off as the most conservation-minded individual on the surface. He was the owner of a local quarry and coal mine that was in the family for multiple generations. So, as you can imagine, when a federal employee showed up to his place talking about obscure things such as planting milkweed for monarchs, implementing prescribed fire to enhance wildflowers and combat invasive plant species, and creating snags in the forest to provide roosting habitat for federally listed Indiana, northern long-eared, and gray bats, I received a pretty strange look. I was surprised he didn't throw me out, and we started to roam his property and started to chat more about his interests, and I learned he was actually an avid outdoorsman who loved to hunt deer, turkey, and quail, and was actually concerned about recent population trends, specifically with the quail, which is a justified concern to have. His goal was to provide these species with the resources they needed so that his children and grandchildren could enjoy these special things with him and also after he was gone. We spent many hot hours in his field enhancing this habitat, collecting ticks and chiggers on myself, and I was able to educate him about the practices that we were implementing, how the declining monarch population makes a remarkable migration every year and only uses milkweed as a host plant, and how the listed bat species that I was telling him about will use these snags that we just created as roost and maternity trees and the open prairie as foraging grounds. And possibly the most important thing to him was how the deer, turkey, and quail will all benefit from these same changes as well. So at this point, when we finished the last part of our project, we were sitting on his porch, sipping some freshly made lemonade, and I asked the mayor a blunt question. So what do you think of my program now? And do you think others would be interested? And he looked at me and he said, the Fish and Wildlife Service and the Partners Program are all right. And I really can't stress enough how big of a compliment that was coming from this man. He then, to my surprise, offered his services to help me with outreach, which was amazing. At this point, we came up with the idea of inviting my entire list of landowners within our strategic cluster to his cabin for a barbecue, just informally chat about the Partners Program, the partnership, and what we were trying to accomplish. A few short months later, on a wonderful fall evening, my partners, a large group of community members, and myself joined the mayor at his cabin. That night, I didn't have to do much talking because the community members were all looking to the mayor for answers to see if he gave his stamp of approval. By the end of the night, I walked away with 20 signed landowner agreements and over 1,500 acres of future restoration.
So I'm going to put this accomplishment into context. In Washington state, the Partners Program has averaged roughly 5 projects and 500 acres per year. Nick secured about 4 to 5 years' worth of projects in a summer due to this partnership. There have been some larger scale agreements here in the Pacific Northwest, particularly in protecting sage-grouse habitat in eastern Oregon. Those agreements have protected more than 1 million acres of habitat. But most of the time, partnership agreements between the agency and private landowners are realized on a much smaller scale. Nick's achievement in the Midwest was an incredible feat.
Although important, I don't tell this story to brag about the acres we were able to conserve through this partnership or program. In fact, I tell the story to bring light to how important the things that never get counted in any reporting system actually are. This sense of community and trust with our agency is something that I not only want to leave in Southern Illinois, but it's something I want to continue on our prairie landscape, but now in my new position in South Puget Sound of Western Washington.
Know you've been a good friend, and that's in the thick and thin, and I know it's never gonna end, 'cause you've been a good friend.
Thanks to Nick George, our Partners for Fish and Wildlife Program coordinator in Washington, who managed to win over Southern Illinois' unofficial mayor. This story was told to me and External Affairs Officer Dana Bivens. All music was downloaded from the YouTube audio library and posted for copyright-free uses by their artists. The music included Gold in Them Hills by Nathan Moore, This Little Light of Mine by Ease Jammy Jams, Hannah's Song by Chris Hagen, and Good Friend by the Audionautics. Good Friend was posted under a Creative Commons license. You can find more of their music at www.audionautics.com. This is your host, Sarah Levy. Thanks for listening.